I'm Rashonda. I'm the founder of ArtByRow.com, where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials. My goal is to help 1 million aspiring artists learn to love their artwork. If this sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Now let's head on over to the studio and get ready to create some art. Okay, today let's look at how to do block letters. And we're going to start by talking about the difference between a bubble letter and a block letter. So a bubble letter will usually have all the edges and the ends will be rounded off. So if we look at the letter T, your bubble letter will be sort of like, think of them like a balloon or like the balloon animals and how they come together, and everything would be rounded at the ends. So that would be your bubble letter T. A block letter T, you would have your basic letter shape, but then these ends would have all straight edges and corners without anything rounded off, and that would be your block letter. Anytime you're doing any kind of lettering style, whether it's bubble, block, graffiti, it doesn't really matter what you're working on. It's always a good idea to start with your regular guidelines for your lettering. And what I mean by this is drawing out just your straight lines first. So if you wanted to do a block letter A, just make a letter A and then add the thickness around it, using the letter that you drew as your guideline to help you, and then you'd come in here and do the inside. That just helps make the shape of the letter. It makes it a lot easier. And you can practice any letter of the alphabet simply by drawing the shape of the letter in the inside and working around it, and adding the inside to your A would give it that overall thickness. And then when you're done, you would erase that and your block letter would be left behind. Now, if you're doing this with your artwork, you're going to want to draw your lines much lighter than what I'm doing here. I'm making them darker intentionally so you can see it a little bit better on the camera. But that's going to be your best approach to doing your lettering, whether you're doing block letters or bubble letters, graffiti letters. It doesn't matter. You still want to write out your basic shape in the inside to work off of. So what about letters that have naturally rounded edges on them? So for example, the letter R. If we look at the letter R, and there's a lot of different ways that you can make your letters. You can come off of here, you can make the other leg down here. Doesn't matter, just do it whatever style that you think looks good. You can make these letters like this that have the rounded parts on them. You could make them squared off, or you can make that part round and then the rest of it would be squared off. So it would be something like this. And really this should come, these should match. But you could keep this rounded. And then you would erase this inside part. That's one way you could do it. The other thing you could do is, even if you draw it so it's rounded at the top and you make your bottom part coming off, you could actually make this squared if you wanted to. I personally don't really like the way it looks. I think it looks better letting the rounded parts be rounded off and keep the rest of it squared off. You can make these the same length. You can make one longer, one taller. You could do it that way. And when you're doing your letters, don't be afraid to add your own personal style to it. You can do any type of design for your letter that you want. And even if you're not doing a full out graffiti style lettering, there's still a lot of different variations you can do with your letters to make them a little bit more interesting. And these things could be, making this part come down longer would change the way it looks from having these being the same. Another thing you could do is change the angle of how it's coming off. You could make your ends wider at the bottom. Maybe make them flare out a little bit to make it more interesting. A lot of different things you can do. And I always recommend doing a scrap piece of paper first and just playing around with your lettering styles. If you're doing a word that has multiple letters on it, you want to make sure you're consistent. So if you're making letters that you're letting the rounded parts be round, you want to keep it consistently. So you don't want to do an R with the top rounded out and then do like maybe a B and have it squared off. You want to keep them consistent within the word if you're doing an entire word. If you are doing your artwork where you want a word, so say if you wanted to do art, I suggest making some guidelines first so you can keep them consistent. Or if you don't want them consistent, that's fine. They don't have to be. But then that should be intentional. You don't want your letters to be all different sizes just because you didn't make them come out the way you wanted them to be. If you want to make them different sizes, that's fine. That could be part of the style of your artwork. But if not, if you're trying to keep them consistent, just draw some guidelines. And again, just make them light so you can go back in and erase everything later. And usually when you're doing your drawings with your block letters, you're going to end up outlining stuff, going over it, maybe put a black outline on it. So all that's going to get erased anyway. And once you outline everything, you can just take like a pink pearl eraser or whatever you use and go over the whole thing and clean it up real easily, and you don't have to worry about it too much. And don't be afraid to let your lines overlap when you're doing your lettering. That usually makes it look a little bit nicer, makes it more interesting. They can overlap a little bit. You don't want too much of it to be covered up, but it looks a little bit nicer if they overlap some and the letters run into each other and touch each other. So once you get the outline done, you can come in with there we go. So I'll just show you with the Sharpie. If you come in with your Sharpie afterwards and add your outline, and I'm just going to do this real quick. We're not too worried about making it look pretty right now. Just showing you what I mean. If you come in here with your outline, and then of course the next step would be to add your colors. So if you outline your letters and then you use your eraser to clean up your pencil lines, then you can erase these guidelines right along with everything else. And then all you would have to do from there, get your markers or color pencils or paint or whatever it is you want to add your outline or your colors to. And then your pencil lines are all gone, your drawing's cleaned up. And the only thing you have left is just your artwork. Of course, you would want to make this look a little bit nicer. Take your time, do it slower, maybe add a little more thickness to your lines. I usually make my lines a little bit thicker. I think it looks better, but that's part of my style and how I prefer to do my lettering. But definitely when you're doing it, draw out some guidelines. If you want to make your letters so they have like maybe where they're wavy, if you're doing somebody's name, you could do that too. And you could put your letters in here. You can make them get smaller as they go. Using guidelines is a great way to lay everything out ahead of time and have things, it makes it a little bit easier, I think. You can have everything laid out so you can see what it looks like before you put a bunch of work into it. And it makes it a lot simpler when you're doing it right from the beginning and laying out your guides instead of trying to do your letters as you go and then come up with whatever the ideas you have in mind. And then you're working on it and then maybe it's like, oh, this isn't going to turn out right. If you lay out all your guidelines ahead of time, then you know a little bit about what it's going to look like before you get it all the way done. So if you want it to go like this and then taper off and make it smaller, so say if you wanted to do the word beautiful, you can put your letters just like this. So you know what it's going to look like and you can see ahead of time, yeah, you like it, or no, that's not quite the effect I'm going for. And then you just do each letter around it, just like I showed you with the word art. And just go along, do your letter, outline it, erase all your pencil lines, and it makes it a lot easier and a lot less intimidating to do it this way, because just all you're doing is following along with these guidelines that you laid out, which are simple because you're just writing out a word and then you do your artwork around it. It helps take some of the pressure off and it sort of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like ahead of time. So that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. Reach out to me. I'm here to help you. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day and happy creating.